recording this also. And tonight we come together with a few of my friends to sit in the conversation room and talk about some difficult conversations that we've probably been discussing at home, probably with our friends and our family members at work, out to lunch, or even maybe dinner. And so tonight is our kickoff for breaking the silence of uncomfortable conversations across America. And tonight I have with me Susie Copeland, Susie Bowie, Troy Bellamy, Andrea Johnson, Johnny Chris, and Daryl Davis. Now I will go to them and let them tell you a quick couple of minutes about themselves. And we'll start with Troy Bellamy.
Well, my name is Troy Bellamy, and I'm a local educator at Lincoln Memorial Middle School in Palmetto. From Sarasota, grew up here. I've done a number of different industries, mostly in the financial services. I currently am a licensed insurance agent selling everything from life, health, auto. And I'm just looking forward to this conversation. I think, anytime we can all get together and discuss what we can do better for our community and for ourselves and our families, it's a good thing.
Thank you so much, Troy. Next, we'll go to Susie Bowie.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Susie Bowie. I am the Executive Director of Manatee Community Foundation, and we are an organization that provides grants and scholarships in our community and works with people who live and give in Manatee County that care about making it a better place. And it's really an honor to be here with you, Xtavia, and your friends. And I will imagine that tonight I will learn a lot of really good things that I can use to enhance the work we do in the community. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Susie. Next, we'll start with Miss Susie Copeland.
I'm Susie Copeland. I've lived here for right at 49 years. I retired from the city of Bradenton 2006. I'm involved in a lot of organizations here in Manatee County. I guess my passion is voter turnout is kind of my lead passion. And that's why I've been working in that area for a number of years, is ensuring that voters have access to the ballot box and encouraging voters to please exercise their constitutional right to vote. And thank you for inviting me to this conversation. I'm looking forward to hearing different perspectives on the subject of racism.
Thank you so much, Ms. Copeland. Next, we'll have Andrea Johnson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Andrea Johnson. My husband and I moved to Manatee County in 2002 from the Midwest. We consider Manatee County our home. We're raising 3 children here. I am a local attorney and I volunteer for many organizations in the community, and I am extremely passionate about changing our community for the better.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Next, we'll have Johnny Chris.
What's going on, everybody? How are you? I am known as Johnny Christ here in the area, radio personality extraordinaire, a legend in my own mind. I have always been fascinated with this huge dichotomy, and I never believed that change can truly start at the top. It always starts down at the first tier. And when Xtavia, which I thank you so much for bringing me a part of this, when she asked me to be a part of this, I felt it was my duty to say yes. I am a graphic designer at Aquarius Graphics in Sarasota, and I really look forward to really understanding things that I didn't understand before, because I do have a lot of questions, and as well everybody else does, so I'm hoping maybe I can ask some questions that somebody's thinking. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And next we have Detective Daryl Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Darrell Davis. I'm currently working at the Manatee County Sheriff's Office. I've been there for 24 years. Currently working the homicide unit. I grew up here in Bradenton, graduated from Southeast High School. I left Southeast High School, went to the military in the United States Army, where I served for 8 years. Then I wanted to come back home and serve my community, and this is where I've been for the last 24 years. Active at my church as a deacon at Bible Baptist Church of Palmetto, Florida. And I'm elated to be here as well tonight, too, so we can have some dialogue and try to make some changes, because the only way change comes about that we have to activate something. So Xavier, I'm excited that you invited me here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Now, we do have a couple other members, and if they're able to get in, we will bring them in during the conversation. But we're about to get started. So when we say uncomfortable conversations, these are conversations that we just probably won't have out in front of everyone, but we are going to put ourselves out there tonight, and we're going to have this conversation. And we want to make sure that it is important to really make sure that people understand where other people come from. And if I ask someone the question, and if I started with you, Mr. Bellamy, and I said, what has been your experience with racism, and what does that mean to you?
Wow. I can honestly say that I have not experienced overt racism. I've never been called the N-word. I've never been accosted. However, you know, there are instances where I received a certain type of treatment because of my skin color. And again, these types of things, because it's, you know, it's just like they talk about, and I don't want to get political, but it's just like the Southern strategy. You know, you don't come out and say all the N-words and all the other stuff now. You just use code words, or you use, you know, privileges that you have to impede progress from others, you know, just to say, okay, well, I can do it, you know, and they never know that this is how I really feel. So like I said, I've never experienced racism, but you know, it's a feeling, it's a survival instinct that you grow up with. It's not a paranoia. It's just things that you realize that there are certain social boundaries and other things that almost are inherent in our culture. And then when I talk with older people, I love talking with older people. I grew up with a great grandfather, and I had grandparents, and dad now is 80, and I talk to him, and he doesn't have a bitter bone in his body. He's never talked bad about, he's never shared an experience with me. I think he shared one experience that he had overtly racist. But, you know, when I ask him about, you know, the 60s and the 50s, going to college and things like that, and my father can tell me that he had to stand up on the bus from Tallahassee to Sarasota. You know, he and my mother were riding home from college, Florida A&M. And if anybody's ever caught the bus, the Greyhound from Tallahassee, you know, regularly in a car, it's 4.5 hours. On this Greyhound bus, it's 12. You had to stand up all the way from Tallahassee to Sarasota and not say a mumbling word just because that's the way it was. Even when there's a seat open, that's just how it was. And so, you know, when you see those kinds of experiences and you try to gain perspective, or you try to find out, well, why would you go through this, or how did this happen, and why didn't you feel this way, or why didn't you react this way, then you realize that really it's not about being mean. It's just about helping each other understand that we're all human. So that's my experience.
Thank you so much for that. It really makes you think, because, you know, I was talking to someone and they said, well, I've never been a minority, I've never been Black. I don't know what it is to walk in a Black person's shoes. And sometimes I try to have this conversation and say, I don't want you to feel like you're Black. I don't, because that's not how God made us. But is it about empathy? I don't think it's about sympathy, but is it about understanding what a group of people went through and understanding how they felt and understanding if it happened to you, how would you feel? Detective David, same question.
Um, just, I'll pick it back off of Mr. Bellamy. Have I experienced the overt? I can say when I was in the military, I did experience that. My first time when I went to the Army, when I was stationed at Fort Bragg, that I realized that there was an issue because of my color. I had a supervisor, that's the way he was. But that was a challenge that I overcame, and it made me better. And it made me better for who I am today, to realize it's not a skin issue, it's a sin issue. That's what it boils down to. God made us all in his own image, and I think the sooner we realize that he made us, and we can look at each other and say, this is God's creation, we'll be a lot better people. So I know now in this day and in this climate, there's so many things that are going on, the division and the racism that's so prevalent out here, whether it be political for whatever reason. When we start looking at the heart of people, we start looking at the heart, we'll be a lot better nation and a lot greater people because of that, instead of looking at somebody for the color of their skin.
I'm gonna circle around, and Johnny, I'm gonna come to you. I know you've grown up around so many different people, and when I talk about racism or discrimination, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on discrimination is I spent a lot of time in Newtown. My great-grandmother owned a house right behind a Burger King. So I lived on those corners. I walked those streets. I played football in those streets with my family. I never really understood exactly the whole premise of racism, other than the fact that it was basically insinuating that one race is superior to another, which is really weird when you truly think about it. And what's even more puzzling is here I am, a 38-year-old man, and there are still people who have the audacity to still think like that. Like, when we start taking groups and we start breaking them down into individual people, that's when the rubber meets the road. That's when we're not going to have as much, I don't believe. Because if I look at, say, Daryl, for example, and when they say, hey, who's your friend Daryl? Tall guy, blue shirt, shoes, and everybody looking around, oh, well, why didn't you just say the black man over there? Because that's not the first thing that came to my mind. Like, there are other adjectives to describe somebody. A lot of it is really bad thinking, bad training. There is no such thing as bad student, only bad teacher. Hate is taught. Nobody's born with it. Like, nobody wakes up and comes out and their first words out of their mouth is, I'm white, I'm superior. Nah, that they see things. And whether it be any issue, kids are extremely impressionable. And if you want to get down to the root of the issue, one thing a child wants between the ages of when they're first born and when they're 5 is they just want the love of their parents. So what do you think that says to a child when they hear that parent saying all these nasty things about somebody who looked different than them? Oh, well, if I do that, then mom and dad will love me twice as much. Oh, I'm about that. So
Good.
that's just my take on it.
I like it. Nice start. Andrea, I'm gonna come to you. I know some of the work that you do in the community, and like, as a white woman that's an attorney that's wanting to help everyone, when do you think you realized there was this difference amongst people and how they treated people. You know, I have my friends, but then there's this particular time where I was like, okay, so this is what's going on.
That's a great question. Actually, I thought I would be the first one to bring up Jesus, but Daryl beat me to it. I say that to say my moral foundation, I can't speak of anything other than my faith. What I believe and what I think and how I treat others comes from my faith in Jesus Christ. And so that is my moral foundation, that we are all created equal. We are all created in the image of God. And that's how I try to treat everyone. I did mention that I grew up in the Midwest, and so there was not much diversity that I was exposed to growing up. And so in my mind, racism then was what Troy and Daryl first started off saying as overt racism. Like, that's what I considered racism to be. Mm-hmm. And then moving down here to Florida, and which it is, Manatee County is much more diverse from where I came from, and having conversations like this, I've been having them for years and educating myself and learning about them. There is a lot of what's been termed microaggressions, where it's not the overt racism of, as far as I think I'm a superior race than you, but people being treated differently because of the color of their skin, subtly, you know, things that come from stereotypes or implicit bias. And so that, especially within my profession, I don't know how it came to be that this became something that I cared about and was a passion of mine, but it has developed over the years. But to answer your question directly, I can remember I was a teenager, you know, much different person than I was now in the Midwest. And I can remember my friend was driving a car and driving down the street, and there were Black men walking on the sidewalk, and she automatically locked her doors. And I remember feeling in my heart like, that seems wrong. You know, why? Just because, you know, she saw Black men walking down the street, would you feel the need to lock your doors? And, you know, educating myself over the years, it's because of, you know, wrong stereotypes that have been made. And so I have, you know, put myself out there. I'm willing to have uncomfortable conversations, because I think change happens with authentic relationships. I am very appreciative. I'm sorry if I'm taking longer to answer this question.
You're fine. You're fine.
But, you know, there is much greater diversity that my children are growing up with. They're having a different experience. You know, they go to school with, they play sports with, they're friends with, you know, kids who are Black, brown, and white. And to me, that's a great starting point, because I didn't have that starting point. And there's other things, you know, we do as a family, but I think the ability to grow up within diversity is a great help, so that we don't get these stereotypes or implicit bias thoughts in our minds in the first place.
And we're going to touch a little bit more on implicit biases, but, you know, kind of going back, you know, I hear you say, you know, the locking of the door. I had a conversation with someone says, I don't care what color you are. And it wasn't more about the stereotype of a Black man. For this person, it was, if you look like someone like a thug, or you might do something to me, I don't care what color you are, I might move over, or I might change my direction. I might protect myself. I might think, okay, I might need to just make sure I'm safe as I walk by that person. But that also is perception, and looking at someone and also saying, I might assume, which we know what that leads to. But I want to come over to Susie. And also, Andrea, I like that you said, going back to Johnny said, the first thing a child wants to be is love. They don't come out saying, I don't like someone because of the color of their skin. It's taught. And she's saying that as I raise my children, I'm going to make sure that they're grounded and they play with other kids and they love on. I'm going to teach what's right. Susie. And Susie works with a lot of different people to make sure that they're supported in some of their ventures, and that people that are able to invest in the community and help other organizations and nonprofits be successful, that's what she's doing. So there really is no color in this. But what I would like to know, Susie, is have you ever sat down with maybe a funder, an investor, and they say, well, I want my money to go a certain place. And I rather for it to go over here, but not into this particular neighborhood. Not the Black community this time, but you say, well, they all are the same. How do you handle yourself when it comes to maybe having to deal with someone that might have these implicit biases or these stereotypes? Because it's very important for you to be able to address it immediately, but also keep your job and also be respectful. So how do you handle those things?
Yeah. So thank you, Xtavia, for giving me a super hard question. I knew that you were going to do that. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I do want to share something that is a difficult reality, but we're here to have an uncomfortable conversation. The overwhelming number of people I have the opportunity to work with are deeply caring. They want to learn. They care about people who are different from them. But there are people who give their dollars in the community that exhibit racism. And that's a fact. And so part of my job is to work with people and talk with them, first of all, about where their passion exists. And it's to provide education to them about what's going on in the community. And Xtavia, I've never had a case where someone said, I don't want the money to go to underserved communities or people of color. But many times they want to make those decisions without involving the people who live in those communities. And that is bringing up a conversation about a system of racism that exists in our country, where we make decisions, the people in power make the decisions without necessarily involving people that live in the communities, that know their communities best, that know who should be taking an active role in determining where resources go. So one of the things we like to do is make sure that we've connected people to the communities that they want to serve, and they make sure that the leadership in those communities is making decisions and informing where resources go. I think the overt racism that we talked about a little bit earlier, many of us have been shocked to see how much of that still exists today that has been brought out in the last few months. But what's very insidious are the systems of racism that are biased against specific people, that continue to allow inequities to exist. I think those are some of the hardest things to talk about, because it's hard to pinpoint exactly where they come from and exactly how to fix them. But from my point of view, one of the things that we can do that is the most effective things is to listen and learn, is to keep our mouths quiet and ask people about their perspectives, and then not invalidate them because we haven't had those same experiences. And that's one of the reasons I really value conversations like this, because I know my experiences are going to be very different from anyone else on the call. And by listening and learning with my mouth quiet, I can learn a lot more than I could just from talking to people who are like me. And that is, I think, a lot of the work that we have to do. We have to do the reading, we have to educate ourselves, and we have to listen to people that have had different experiences. And then in my role, it's my job to pass those experiences on to the people that I have the pleasure of working with.
Thank you so much. And you always give really, really good answers. But one thing I do appreciate about you is that, you know, when you talk about, it's hard to be in conversations where someone tells you what a particular neighborhood needs, but you never experienced that neighborhood. It's almost someone being allergic to cantaloupe, and you know cantaloupe needs to be given to that person. If you never have that communication or that conversation, you'll never know what those people are allergic to, or what they can accept, or what they can deal with. So it's always good to have those conversations. Susie Copeland, I know you've retired, you worked a long career. I know you've been on the front line getting people registered to vote. And what has been your experience with racism? How have you decided to move forward from those experiences? And how have you applied them to making sure the future generations understand that they have to do better and the education of the past?
I think growing up in the 60s in segregated South certainly plays a role in who I am today. I will say that I don't allow anyone to define who I am. That's first of all. And my mother always taught us, I'm no better than anyone, but I'm not less than anyone. And so that has always been my mindset. And I don't allow racist acts, racist comments, racist behavior define who I am. I had this lady at church. It's a mixed congregation. And I tend to be a very outgoing person, speaking, showing brotherly love, sisterly love towards each other. And I went up to shake her hand and she just looked at me. So I said, okay, I know who you are. And I moved on. I did not let that impact who I am. I think Daryl said it quite correctly when he said that is sin. And when you are in a relationship with Christ, you don't allow those sin issues to get in your way. I had this conversation, and sometimes I had this conversation. We had a lady at church, well, it was actually her husband who had been very ill. And so I reached out to them via phone. And I said, hi, I'm just calling to check on you to see how you are. And he was rough, very rough with me. And when I identified the church that I was affiliated with, he calmed right down. I shared it with the sisters in a sister's Bible class. And their excuse was, oh, he may have just had a bad day. I didn't take it as a bad day. I don't care who calls. It's a way that you can speak to any individual. And so I handle it, I see it, and I tend to be inquisitive, and I do ask questions. Try to engage in a conversation. I've had with the League of Women Voters about 10 years ago, Nancy Horn and I started we called it Conversations About Racism. And we did that a number of years. So we've been in this discussion about racism for God knows how long. I think it's time now that we move from the conversation and go to some real solutions. And I think it goes to the heart of individuals. I believe it takes having conversations with individuals. And so just don't allow anyone to define who you are, and not be troubled when you encounter racist acts, racist behavior. You just don't allow it to infiltrate your spirit. And I think you will continue to move forward and embrace, because I believe that we all created in the image and likeness of God. And from that perspective, that's how I live. Yes, there are racist people out there. I realize that. And the only thing you can do is, if you can have a conversation with them, try to have that conversation, but don't let it influence who you are. That perspective, that's how I live. Yes,
Sorry, guys. So hearing all the conversations from what you all said, I kind of went back and forth with this, and I think about these. I've talked to all of you, and the people who weren't able to come on tonight, I would probably slide them into the next conversation. But implicit biases. racism and discrimination falls under racism, right? But the implicit biases of our thoughts and what we've learned and what we think and what we've been told and those stereotypes. And I want you to park that right there. And so I had a conversation and someone said, and this is I wasn't offended by the question. Says Xavier, I hope this is not a racist question, but I would like to know, do you feel like Black people, since slavery was so long ago, that they should stop being victims and pursue the resources, tools, and opportunities of America and move on? And I'm not saying that slavery didn't happen. I'm just saying maybe we should move on. Now, my answer to that question was, it's not about slavery anymore. We know slavery happened. What I would like people to know, and a lot of people know my background, I'm not ashamed of it. I am who I am. But what I do like when my friends call me and we have these conversations is that it's not about slavery. It's about a group of Black people, a group of people, Black people, that yes, they were brought to America. There's many immigrants throughout America. But why was it that the group of Blacks had Jim Crow laws that were implemented and put in place so that if I did go, Susie and Drea, I wouldn't have been able to go to school and be educated with you. Johnny, same thing. At that time, we wouldn't have been able to shop together, eat together, go to church together, because for some reason, and I just want to know, what were those people thinking at that time? So no, I can't hold maybe Susie's great-great-great-great-grandfather. I would never blame her grandfather or great-great-grand people from saying they owned slaves. That's not my thing. But we have to actually say it happened and it was wrong. I don't necessarily think people are looking for you to say, you know, I'm blaming you. I think we just need to understand. Let's just pause for 1 second. You tell me what other group of little kids think about 5-year-old and 4-year-old kids that might want to play with Susie or Johnny, but can't because that's not the way they do things at this point. And I explain it like this, you know, at that time, it's like, if I had a child and I chastised them a certain way, maybe I spanked them with a belt, my child is probably going to spank their child with a belt too. And then there's a generation that's going to say, maybe we shouldn't spank our children anymore, but I'll pop you. But that chastising might still be there. And then it might be, I'm going to put you in timeout. So from generation to generation to generation, even though it might not be the slavery, you know, from the ship to work in the land, but those Jim Crow laws were just called that modern type slavery. Well, were you truly really even free? So, you know, and I don't get mad at white people for asking questions or having their opinions. That's not in me and it's not of me, but I can sit down with you and say, let's talk about this. Now, why do you feel that way? Now, who do you know that you're related to couldn't shop where they wanted to shop, go down to fish where they want to fish? And then one of the things that I bring up, and anyone just raise your hand when you're ready to jump in, is Emmett Tillman. Emmett Tillman was this 14-year-old that comes to visit his father, and he's from up north. He comes down to the south, and they always used to teach him what he should and should not do as he travels. And in this particular day, when he's out with his, you know, relatives and they're having fun as kids do, he looks into this white lady's face, and, you know, if you know the story. Why? Johnny, you got your hand up first. Let's go. Let's comment. Go ahead, sweetie.
What you just said is a lot to take in, and that's for anybody. When people speak of like implicit bias training, who is that really designed for? That's not designed for everybody. That's designed for one group. When you take the culture, the population, and you try to apply yesterday's standards by today's standards, you ultimately are setting yourself up for failure. You tell me if I was a black man and I'm sitting there telling my child, you've got to act a certain way, and there's this invisible boogeyman that sits out in the ether that's going to get you, and you'll never be able to account for anything because there's always going to be somebody holding you back that creates a milieu, and what child's going to want to try? I wouldn't want to try. I'd be like, nah, screw that. Nah, if I'm already set up for failure, then I'm going to lose all the way. So when we talk about like the culture, because that for all of us to sit there and say that what's gone on in like the last 5 years has not affected us, we'd be lying to ourselves. We would be lying to everybody in the room, and we'd be acting like nothing has happened when we all know that it has. My question is, if I cannot tell you that you were wrong, then you are not my equal. If you cannot tell me I am wrong, then I must not be your equal. When we answer that, we can really start, because our generation is fastly going down the hall. And Susie, I would love to hear like more of these like old like Southern like Jim Crow stories, because that I find it fascinating when you look at how far everybody has come and how far we have yet to go. But we'll never get anywhere if we're too busy pointing out the finger. And as you stated, you know, paying for the sins of my father. If I'm wrong, if I do somebody wrong, I got to handle that like a man. I don't have to walk up to somebody and I don't have to, and I don't have to chant and do all of that to know that my heart is there. I don't have to go out and tell everybody every day that the sky's blue, because we all know that. I don't have to say these things because my actions speak more than my words ever will. And that's my thought on implicit bias, because it's not across the board. It is designed for one group of people. And that's not working together. That's a we-they dichotomy.
Troy, thank you, Johnny.
Hey, great. I like what Johnny said, but again, this is exactly the point of disconnect. Because what happens is until you look at the past, you won't know what the effects are. So I get it, Johnny. I get it. You know, you and I, we could be friends and not even think about anything that has gone on and prejudice, even the stuff that's happened recently. All those things are sort of a micro look at implicit bias. And I think one of the biggest things is the fear that many white people feel like, okay, if I feel a certain way, then people are going to think I'm automatically racist. Or it makes me think just because I'm white, I'm racist. And that's really not true. You have to go back. You cannot separate the past, because the view of the black man has been tailored before the civil rights movement, before all the world wars, before all of these things. These things are even baked into the Constitution. When you look at the Constitution, they say that the black man is 3/5 of a human being. So right there, you're starting, and this is the only reason that was baked into the Constitution, because people who were really, really smart, scientists, anthropologists, other people who had done research and had gone to Africa and been to other countries, were the ones who said this. Now, why would they say that? Because at that time, Europe is trying to come up. Africa had ruled the world for years. And here again, let's go back now to what we're talking about, the 1619 Project. There's a lot of people, oh, we don't want to teach the 1619 Project. They're trying to revise history. You cannot deny that Africa has had a tremendous history of influence on mathematics, culture, music, medicine, everything before modern times. We're talking about the pyramids. We're talking about embalming. We're talking about all these things that the Africans taught the world. And what happens is everybody wants to start from slavery when, of course, Africans had no rights that anybody had to worry about respecting. And as slavery, as evil as it was, there was not an automatic hate. White people just didn't go over this, I hate you. No, they realized, I don't want to be out in that sun picking that cotton. I need the money, and I can make you make me money. Not only by what you're doing, by your work and your labor, but I can breed you. And if I can breed a whole family, 16, 17, 18 kids, and get $500 a wop, it's like breeding puppies. And then I sell them, and then you become commodities. You become chattel. And that's where the hurt, and that's where the advantage and also the privilege comes in. Because now it's an economic system that has been baked in since 1600s. Now it's more advantageous to say, nah, we don't want y'all to participate in voting. We don't want y'all living in our neighborhoods. We don't want this, that, and the other. We don't want you to even have the same kind of education.
I guess my big question, and you'll have to correct me that if I'm wrong, but when the civil war ended, nobody can tell me, I don't care who you are, nobody can tell me that no African American didn't get their 40 acres and a mule. Prove to me that African Americans weren't here before the Native Americans. If they could get on a boat, then the ocean current will take them here. I know about the Moors. I know about all of that. I most definitely understand. But when we're sitting there saying things like it's baked into the cake, whose cake? I don't see nobody holding those Native Americans accountable who owned slaves on American soil. I don't see nobody holding the African Americans accountable, all 4,000 of them who owned tens and hundreds and thousands of slaves on American soil.
I think though, I don't necessarily know if that's what, I think what he's saying is that, you know, I think probably everybody owned some slaves sometime during this thing called the world. If you go back hundreds, I mean, this is something that happened before Christ. There's some slaves, but I think when you
slavery and indebtedness are different things. There could have been indentured servitude where you may have owed somebody some money and you had to work the money, work it off. That's different. That's sharecropping. That's sharecropping. I knew a man, one of my very good friends, that his family sharecropped until the 1980s. Yeah, brother.
Yeah.
That's real.
My mother-in-law. Yes. She has those stories too.
So, you know, I get those stories about African Americans or even Indians. The Indians were abused people too. And the Indians may not have necessarily, you know, you got to remember the Africans came here to America with the Indians, and you got a lot of the mixed groups of tribes and things like that.
Sure.
People killed too. Their land, their entire continent was taken from them.
So Troy, what I hear Troy is saying is he's not saying he's blaming you or anybody else.
No,
what
I don't
he's
know.
saying is before we move forward, we're gonna have to understand where we came from. We're gonna understand what we've all been through. Susie, go ahead.
I just want to jump in on that. And Troy, I loved what you said because, and Johnny, I love your honesty. So I appreciate that. Troy, I listened to every word of the 1619 Project. It was very meaningful for me to hear that. And I think what was important to me is that it's the history, it's the Black history of America. It's told by Black people, right?
Thank you.
And so what we're missing, what we've missed all this time is all of the history books that I read in school were written by white people. And so like it or not, there was bias in there. And that's the value, I think, of the 1619 Project. We need to have other voices so that we have a complete understanding of the history that we share in America. And when I see and hear about those types of things being suppressed in nearby counties, maybe not Manatee, it tells me that existing power is still there and held by people that just don't want to share another voice. What could be the harm in listening and hearing and teaching about the 1619 Project, because it's written by people that have a different perspective, their own perspective. So I find that extremely valuable. It is also very instructive to me that it has been stopped by a group of people that simply don't want it told. And that is where I think we have some real opportunity for more positive conversations about the necessity of it. So thank you for sharing that.
And Xavier,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I'd like to say too that growing up in the 60s, and the bar was set in terms of success, of matriculating through, high school, then college, then looking for employment. You were still denied the better paying jobs because of the color of your skin. And as I moved through life, and I thought, well, I felt that we had moved beyond my 60s years. But after the election of President Obama, I started seeing people raising their ugly heads again. I started seeing all of the stuff that's going on now. And so growing up, we saw white men in hoodies. Now I see white men in suits and ties. So they've changed their uniform, so to speak, but the effects of what they're doing is still very prevalent today. We can look at our judicial system. We see, if we based our thoughts on who committing crimes, who are the people committing crimes. When we look at our prisons, Black and brown people make up the majority of those in prison. Blacks and Hispanics or brown people are the only ones committing crimes. We have children being incarcerated now at adult prisons. And so we still see, and once you get to prison, and now you've got a felony record. The voters of Florida spoke in 2018, but now we had some state legislators in July of 2019 said, we don't care really what the people said. You're going to have to pay those fines and fees before you can register to vote. Well, when you come out of prison, what kind of job are you going to get? What employer is going to hire you with a felony record? And so the cycle is still going on. It's just in a different format now.
Instead of Jim Crow, it's James Crow Jr. Esquire.
Okay. I like that. Yes.
Hold on, Joy. Let's go back and sum this up. So, because I want to go over to Daryl really quick, because I know he's in criminal justice, and so is Andrea. And Susie talked about the 1619 Project, and looking at the response, I responded to some of that was going on, and I will tell you, I'm not in support of a Black Lives Matter curriculum because I don't know what a Black Lives Matter curriculum is. But as far as Black history, American history, coming from the people who actually went through it, and it gives me chills because it's very emotional for me, because when the history was written, we were not a part of putting history in the book. And I talk about the Holocaust, and I talk about what happened with that. And I ask people, I said, what is the first thing you see when you think about that? And they say, kids dying, camp, starvation. And Frank, I remember the diarrhea. And Frank, I remember learning about that in school. But yet, for Black history, what I remember is slavery, indentured servants, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Harriet Tubman, the ones that they felt, well, this is what you should know. So now we're beyond slavery. Now we're beyond Martin Luther King. Now we're beyond Malcolm X. Let's just, whether we like if the history of America and the things that were done whether it's the Indians, the Black people, or whoever it may be, just tell the story. Because I think when you know look at all the empathy and sympathy we have for the Holocaust and what these people went through. You know why? Because we know the story. And if you don't know the story and you can't be educated about what someone's went through, that's like seeing somebody you never know. You're like, why is that person so mean? Why are they always fighting? Well, maybe they always got jumped on by somebody in their life. Every time they turned around, they were being beat by their husband. So that's why this person is always protected. That's all. That's why they always have this defense up. And we as Americans should not feel that our individuality stories should not be told, because we all come from different places, no matter what. But I feel like once we allow all of our stories to be told equally, in a pie, equal share, then we move forward. Then we're able to get to that next level. I know Daryl is a detective. I know Andrea's in criminal justice. I have a master's in criminal justice. I've been trained as an officer. I've worked in the jail and mentor these young people. And I see young kids, 13-year-old, 14-year-old juveniles, and a lot of brown and Black kids. And most of them don't have the money to, get out. But one thing they talk about going back history. Remember if you had a Black man that was put on trial, and they say in the courts, Andrea, and you guys can probably vouch for me, you get judged by your peers. You have this process that an attorney goes through, and they say, okay, we're going to go here, we're going to pick, okay, that's the wife, she's married, she has children, he's an African American, he's a Spanish guy, that's a white guy, da 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 da. So you can have the peers kind of like, make sure they're judged appropriate. But if you didn't commit a murder and somebody back in the day said you did it, and they said it was a Black man, there's so many stories that you can go through where the person didn't do it. So in the criminal justice system, not just, we're just talking about right now, it's a lot of work we have to do. But Daryl, I want you to comment on some criminal justice experiences, what you see, and then I want Andrea to come in after him, if you don't mind.
Criminal justice. First of all, Troy, Susie, Johnny had great dialogue. I really like that. The criminal justice system, we talk about this all the time. Crime in America, and there's some, I want to say, crime is everywhere, and I don't want to put this on one segment or one group of people that commit all the crime, because that's not what's happening.
That's right.
We got everybody committing crimes all over. My basis is homicide, so I've seen the demographics. Everybody, Black, white, male, female, juvenile. I done seen them all. They all commit crimes.
That's right.
That's across the board.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even sugarcoating it. I just finished a federal trial last year with the feds, where there was a group of guys, Hispanic, Black, mixed. They terrorized Onico for 1 year, 6 murders in less than a year. The system, I mean, what they did, they killed, they were killers. But what happens is when they went before this federal before this federal judge, the judge heard all the evidence and said, y'all don't even deserve to be in society. We've dealt with some groups before. So when people can't conduct themselves in society, I don't care what color you are, you forfeit your right to live in this community because you want to go out here and commit crimes. We got a place for you. Now, you talk about social injustice. Yes, it's happening. We know it's happening. Without a doubt, it's happening. You get, and I'm gonna just say it. You get a white person, a guy, he steals from the store. Black guy steals from the store. The same amount of points, same amount. They do the same crime. The white guy gets probation, Black guy gets jail. That's social injustice. They did the same crime.
Thank you.
It's happening. It is happening. more than we know, but it's not an excuse for us at all. We got to be better in these communities. I just the bottom line. We got to educate these kids, and it's across the board. We can't keep using. I understand the past is what makes us, but in order to go forward,
Yes.
we got to learn from the past and not revisit it, because we keep going backwards now. We going backwards. We keep going backwards. How we go forward is how we get together and come up with it, because that's why nobody's able to come to the table and have a honest conversation, because we tiptoeing around stuff. But the problem is we got to bring God to the forefront of all what that's going on.
Amen.
We missing the mark.
And that sounds good too. But I think also perception, because everybody, the people who want to stay in power, want to give you a perception that it's just the others. It's and I don't want to get political, but again, the first thing that came out of the president's mouth, the Mexicans are rapists, they're this, that, and the other. And every time you say something about police injustice, the first thing they say is Chicago. Everybody's killing each other. All the blacks are killing each other. And the murder rate in the communities is the exact same. Blacks killing blacks, white killing white, because they're homogeneous neighborhoods.
Thank
in
you.
instances. And so what happens is it's a perception to maintain fear. And if I can maintain fear, then I can retain power, because now I've got power over you by fear. And again, that's not Christ-like, because he's not giving us the spirit of fear. But if you look at what's going on television, where these spirits begin to go out, and this is what we talked about earlier, we talked about prejudice and inherent bias. There was an experiment where they had the little girls. I'm sure everyone has seen that. If you haven't seen it, it's an amazing experiment. But they had these little girls, white and black, and they had 4, 5, 6 pictures of little cartoon character kids, and they were of different shades. It went from dark skin to white skin. And they asked the little girls, well, which one is the bad girl? And to a person, each one of them pointed to the little dark skin girl, white and black. And they, oh, she just looks mean. So it's a perception. It's something that not necessarily is inherent, but it's a perception. Maybe it's learned through the cartoons that we see. You know, I grew up in the 70s, and the Flintstones still don't have a black character.
All right.
You understand what I'm saying? So I mean, you understand what I'm saying?
So when you say one thing that I like to say when it comes to backtrack what you said about the Chicago, the killings, the blacks killing the blacks. What you will notice is, some people might not agree with Trump, but one thing that Trump does say, fake news, because the media always puts the black and the white, the black and the white cop, the white and we know it's going on across the board, but what we see is if there's a black killing or a shooter, you're gonna see that 90,000 times a day. And it doesn't seem like we get a complete view of everything. It just seems like, I don't know, Troy, it's like racist sells. As long as you can keep us against each other, and like you say, if the black people are doing this, the Spanish people are doing this, that fear is inherent, and then people get scared, they run scared, they lock their doors, whatever it may be. But I talk about movies. You talk about the Flintstones. Well, you go to the movies, you don't see yourself in the movie, and the Spanish girl is smacking her gun and talking about Papi, and then the black girl has that tough girl, I'm mean, I'm a whoop a girl butt type of attitude. And then it seems like this is just a perception of what people think and what they see. It's not who truly we are. We know we all got bad people in every single culture, every single race, but people give the movies, the media, they give what they feel who we are. And as I'm seeing that there's more of us trying to get in these industries, more of us speaking up, more of us trying to push Black love, Black families, and showing other people that Black people are just as good as white people. But if it's not, like she said, she came from Midwest. She might not seen that many Black people or Spanish people, Asian people. I ain't go to school with a lot of Spanish or Asian people. I mean, and that was I graduated in 97. So, but now you see a lot more Spanish, and you see our kids going to school with a lot more minorities of all different types of races. But really quick, Andrea, I want you to talk, because you're an attorney. We
Yep.
just had a detective talk about a federal case that it was minorities terrorizing, you know, and like he said, everybody commit crimes. I don't care where you at. If you commit a crime, you got a hotel you need to go to. But is it fair when it comes before the judge and there's the sentencing? That we're not saying that if you're black or you're Spanish, you shouldn't go to jail because you commit a crime. What we're saying is if you get sentenced, let's make sure that sentencing is across the board fair and for everyone.
Mhm. Yes, and I'll answer that question. I actually don't do criminal law in my practice, but I am involved in our community. To share some of the positive things that are going on in both Manatee and Sarasota, we have a program called Teen Court. I'm a volunteer for it. It is essentially a second chance program for Midland high schoolers who commit crimes, low-level crimes, and it's designed to stop the school to prison pipeline. And it's a very successful program. Sarasota's got it as well, and so that is good for our community. The Manatee County Bar Association, which is a local bar association, when I was vice president several years ago, we created a diversity and inclusion committee, and their mission is to promote diversity within the bar association because there is an underrepresentation of Black and brown attorneys in our community. I know our state attorney's office, they are very adamant about training their attorneys in implicit bias. And so there are good things that are happening in our community in the criminal justice system. This, as far as sentencing disparities, this issue was addressed a few years ago. And if you go to the 12th Judicial Circuit Court's website, they actually have a response to an article that was done years ago on sentencing disparities. And our then Chief Justice at the time, Charles Williams, he spoke up about that. And the sentencing guidelines themselves, there's no distinction whether you're white or black. But going back to what Susie Copeland said in the very beginning, an individual heart issue, we need to make sure that sentences aren't being given based on stereotypes or implicit bias so that you're not seeing, so that we don't have those disparities.
Very good. Any other comments? Anybody?
Well, and the other piece is when we look at, I mean, you've got your sentencing guidelines. Who's setting those guidelines? And so the person that's setting them, are they a racist? And so they're going to set them so that, well, it may look fair on the surface, but when you've got law enforcement who are typically targeting certain neighborhoods, then you're going to, it's a cycle. It's a cycle. And listen, I just call it like I see it. When I saw the George Floyd incident, I called that murder. And for me, not to call it that, you're blind to have not seen it. Even though I don't know all of the facts, didn't review the case, when I just saw the neck and the body, and the man saying, "I can't breathe." Where is the humanity in that? And so when we look at cases like this, we've got to call it out. We've got to change some laws on the books. We've got to change some laws.
So, Troy,
And that's why I'm pushing voting, because when you get the right people in the legislature, state house and the White House, Congress, the Senate, then we'll see some difference. We'll see some changes to some of these racist laws that are on the book. In the state of Alabama, there still was on the book a couple of years ago, it was against the law for a white man, a black man to marry a white woman. Now, I don't know if they've taken it off, but it was an issue several years ago. So we've still got racist laws still on our books. We've got to make some changes, y'all.
So I got to jump in on this.
And I want to say this too, that media, we've got, I think Susie Bowie talked about systemic racism. It's on every level in our lives. When you look at it, whether it's educational, criminal, you name it, it is there, systemic racism. And so we've got to change some things. We have to change some things. And it just goes beyond just talking about it.
Some people might say that systemic racism doesn't exist. But I do want to jump on that comment about George Floyd. And I am a huge supporter of law enforcement. I am. We got a law enforcement person right here on this call with us that's standing and speaking truth. My concern happens is that right now there's this division in our country with law enforcement, which is almost, and I said I wouldn't go into politics, so I'm not going to touch in it too much, but it's almost like it's divided us like this, that, okay, like law enforcement almost had to choose a side to say, just because of how media and how it was kind of perceived to certain people who support law enforcement. Because my comment about that is, it's just like, you know, we got thieves, you got bad attorneys, you got bad nonprofit executive directors, you got bad politicians, you got bad salesmen, bad teachers, and every single career you can find someone that has done something bad. The thing with law enforcement, unfortunately, you know, they do teach that we have to get home safe. And I asked the question, you know, is it that they're targeting certain neighborhoods or those particular neighborhoods? I see you, Troy. Listen, I'm moderating. Are we targeting these particular neighborhoods, or is that the neighborhood that's had the most shootings, the most murders, and that's where the police need to be? And it happens to be that in our neighborhoods with the people who look like us. So do we not support all law enforcement, or do we work with the law enforcement that actually trying to do some community policing, actually stopping to help our children, actually playing basketball? Like, how do we not sell ourselves out and say we don't want our people to be shot or terrorized and all the things, and driving while black and all the things? I mean, hell, I'm a female and it's happened to me. So just, I may have a connection to say, hey, this happened to me. But there might be someone else that's just driving and can't call anybody. But how do we support our law enforcement and listen, Black people want to be safe too.
Amen.
Just because you live in the neighborhood and you around all these Black people and that don't mean you don't want to be safe. Hell, I want the police to be there where I'm at. I grew up in Onico. I ain't mind seeing the police officer go by. You know, if we wasn't doing something we had no business, you put it away, you kept moving. But you want to make sure that you're protected too. To me, it's not fair to say, you know, just because a police officer is in a Black neighborhood, that means, hell, a Black person might have called the police. You might not see them come up to their house because they might get some backlash, but they want it to be safe too. But I also know there are targets on in these neighborhoods sometimes. And is it because that's where most of the crimes are? So they have this alert that this is where we need to look. Now I'm gonna give Troy a minute. I'm gonna go to Johnny. I'm gonna hit Daryl, and then I'm whoever in it, because I know Troy looked like he got a red on his nose right there.
Big Troy.
No, well, I mean, and when you look at different things, you mentioned about the media, and what happens with the media. I think the media is the catalyst for this change, because there's a lot of things that had they not been on video that we would never have known about. Ahmaud Arbery's case was over a year old. You know, nobody would have said anything had we not seen Eric Garner get choked out on TV, or George Floyd, or the guy in Minnesota who got shot when he told the police officer, I have a license to carry a gun.
That's
and the officer
right.
asked me, all these kinds of things. So the fake media is just a narrative, again, to create fear and misinformation so that they can continue to do what they're doing. And the issue that the media is trying to, reason why you get it and why it's still in the forefront, because everybody's waiting for one instance of justice. Think about Breonna Taylor case, and I'm going to be quiet. Think about
come on, Troy, give it to me.
They broke in, they kick in the woman's.
Thank you.
They kill her, and the officer doesn't even get charged for killing her. He gets charged for shooting in the next door neighbor's apartment, endangering their lives. But her life meant nothing. Her life didn't mean anything. Concerned about the neighbors who happened to be white. Now, I'm not saying that was a consideration or not, because they were in an apartment. They couldn't tell who was in the next door apartment, but they didn't care about Breonna Taylor. And so again, when we police reform, all people want to do is say, no knock warrants, no more of
show codes.
Oh, that's radical. They're radical. They want to defund the police.
No.
They want anarchy in the streets. Your grandma's not going to be safe. Come on. That type of reaction means that there's no common ground in which you want to start to have a conversation. So again, it sounds like I'm howling at the moon. I'm upset. I understand that there's injustice, but there's nobody on the other side who's saying, you know what, that's a good idea. Let's make sure we do this.
Yes.
Go all the way back to, and I'm going to say this is my last thing. Let's go all the way back to President Obama. The first thing that happened to President Obama was his best friend, Dr. Henry Louis Gates, had flown home from China. He was tired. He forgot his key. He has one of those swipe keys to get in his phone. And he broke in his own house in the window, and the neighbors called the police and everything. And the officer came, just like he was supposed to. Dr. Gates explained, hey, I didn't have my stuff. And the officer got all rowdy with him, go through his house. And they got pictures. The guy's got this picture on every wall in the house. He got magazines. He says, listen, this is my house. I'm telling you what's going on. The guy continued on until they got into a verbal disagreement, and they ended up arresting Dr. Gates. Well, President Obama says, that officer's got to be stupid. Oh, Obama doesn't like the police. So now
that's right, Troy.
Perception that no black people don't like police. That is totally
untrue. Correct.
That is totally untrue. But again, now it's a narrative that is baked into a platform. And so now the president has the temerity to say, they want anarchy in the streets. We're trying to protect the streets. And white women from getting their houses broken in by the bad Mexicans and the bad, come on, man. At that point, you've lost all ability to negotiate. There's no more ground for room to say, hey, man, that's not what happened. It was a mistake. It was an honest mistake. President Obama even had race to say, let's have a beer sometime. Come have a beer with me in the White House. And he hates law enforcement.
Johnny.
All right. I am actually very surprised that this topic came up. I don't know a single person on either side of the aisle who says, you know what, George Floyd got exactly what he deserved. Nobody is saying that. Not one person. Not one. You find me somebody and I'll show you somebody who you shouldn't be hanging out with.
But there's not the collective outrage for this man that got bail.
Where was the collective outrage for Walter Scott? Oh, there wasn't, because justice was done. Where was the overall outrage for Freddie Gray? You know why Freddie Gray? Everybody forgets about Freddie Gray.
I remember Freddie Gray.
Because 3 of them, 6 officers were black, and they were charged in a district where the judge was black, where the chief of police was black, in a nation that the black man was running. My issue was never that Obama didn't sit there, and he always took up for police officers until Dallas happened. And then what did he say? He didn't say 2 words like, that's bad. He's like, we need to take this time and really evaluate ourselves. Nah, dude shot 6 police officers, sniped them. A week later, Baton Rouge happened. But everybody is like, dang. Nah, like, if it's going to be like that, I'm cool. But let's keep it, like, unified across the board. Ahmaud Arbery. I hope those people, I personally hope that the people who killed Ahmaud Arbery, I hope they hang, because those type of people don't need to be around, and they damn sure don't need to be on the streets. Same people with Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor. That was unfortunate. My question about Breonna Taylor, which maybe somebody here can answer, is
what's that?
How in the blue hell did the boyfriend not get so much as a scratch, but Breonna Taylor did?
She got
And
8
he the one who shot. I'm like, wait a minute, how the hell did she die?
Well, now you're getting the conspiracy theory.
Okay, so
And-
Point of the matter is they
Listen,
should have never kicked the door in. They
y'all
should have
so
never kicked
excited.
I
the
agree
door in.
with that.
I'm gonna have to have all y'all back.
And
So, I know-
Xavier, I want to say this because I don't want anyone to misconstrue.
Okay.
And for us blacks, I support law enforcement. There are good officers and there are some bad. And I'm no one in this
Thank you for saying that,
in
Susie.
this law enforcement is going to change my mind about that. There are some good ones and there are some bad ones.
Thank
And
you
we
I
need
agree
to
with that.
weed out the bad ones.
I think
That
we have great
goes not
call.
only for law enforcement, that's across the board. We got some great teachers, and we got some bad teachers, poor teachers that should not be in the classroom. We need
I
to
agree.
call them out, need to get them out of there. And other
Agree.
areas of businesses as well, where they're not performing and not doing their job. I don't care whether black, white, green, or purple, they need to go.
Fair.
Because this is about human life.
You
I
guys,
agree.
So I just want people to say that, and the media perpetrating that we as a race hate police. That's a bold-faced lie. I love police. I've invited them, drive by my house, stop by, get a bottle of water, be happy to give you a cup of coffee. I have yet to have one stop by and get it though, but I've offered it many times.
If you
Susan,
want
give
me
me
to
your
dress
address.
up
I'll
as
be
one,
by
I
there.
will. Yeah, for real.
Daryl,
Yeah, I'll come
Daryl,
by. I'll get one.
Daryl.
Yes. Sarah, Susan, give me your address. I'll be by there.
So I know.
Daryl,
I
I'm in the
mean,
city of Bradenton, so you can stop in the city of
No,
Bradenton.
he's the
You know
sheriff.
you're out of your.
I
He's the
go
I
sheriff.
anywhere I
know
want
that,
to go.
but
So
oh, well,
listen,
excuse me.
now I'm gonna start muting you guys. You know we about to see this, so I'm. No, really, like I would like to bring this particular group back again because, I mean, the insight has been amazing and it really has been truly a raw conversation, a positive conversation, an insightful conversation. We weren't able to get too much on how we move forward and how we come together, but I think that's like a part 2. But I would want to sign off saying, I'll give you, just take a minute for me. What have you gotten for this, and what do you want people to know? And if we can move forward, how are we going to begin that first step? And then I'll see you back on part 2. I'm gonna start with you first, Troy.
Well, we got to stop making everything a zero-sum game. Okay, if I give up one thing, that means you got to give up something super important to you. And so they end up canceling each other. Nobody makes gains. You may get something on this end, but then they take away that on that end. And that has been politics, the politics of prejudice for a long time. That's the Southern strategy. Look it up. Lee Atwater. Anybody that's watching this, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, because anything that's good for one community has to be bad for the other community. And that's just the zero. When you give some game like that, it makes it where you can't have a discussion about what's best to move forward. Another thing that has to happen is that we do have to all educate our desires, and we have to look out for one another, and we have to look at communities not as underserved, because underserved to me is code for communities that are not worth a major capital investment.
Troy. That's good.
We
I
have
like
to look
that.
at communities that are deserving, because that word almost sounds like undeserving. Not underserved, it sounds like they're undeserving of capital investment. And so you can't choke off communities and expect for them to thrive, expect for people to try and make it out. You have to make everyone a part of the community. And I think we all have something to offer.
Thank you so much. Well, Susie?
Which Susie now?
I'm sorry, Susie Copeland. And then Susie Bowie. I'm sorry. I forgot it.
Well, first of all, thank you for having the conversation. I think we need to continue the conversations. There's a thing, see something, say something. So when we see these acts of racism, we've got to speak up. I think that is going to really start the ball moving in the right direction. We cannot tolerate it. We will not tolerate it. And just be open and honest. because all of us have our life's experiences that we bring to the table. And my perception of things is not necessarily through my life, is not exactly what it is, but I'm willing to make those changes so that I can see the bigger picture. And I think this is having that conversation is really going to make the difference, and being able to speak when you see stuff that is wrong. We've got to be the voice for the voiceless. When you do it to the least of these, you've done it to Christ. So that's my motto. Thank you, Xavier, for putting this on. I appreciate it. I really do.
Thank you so much, Susie, for coming in and being a part of this. Susie Bowie.
This was a great learning opportunity for me. I loved hearing everyone's perspectives. I think about the value of listening and the value of having conversations where we don't all agree, where they might be uncomfortable, but then to Susie Copeland's point earlier, now what do? We can't just talk about this forever. We got to do something. And, you know, I had the opportunity to hear from an amazing biologist, Dr. Jonathan Hall, a couple weeks ago on a podcast that I listened to called Ologies. And he said, there's a difference between allyship and being an accomplice. And it's great that we're all talking about how we can be allies, but being an accomplice means that you have something at stake. It means you have something to lose by standing up for people that you want to stand up with. And so I think that's an important concept. We have to consider that if we truly believe that we should be working together as people. What are we willing to lose to do that? And that's a tough conversation to have, but it's something we should talk about. So thank you, Octavia.
Thank you so much, Susie. We're gonna go down to you, Johnny.
All right, better. This is certainly, as probably one of the only people who looks as anything other than somebody who's willing to have a serious conversation. This has been something. This has been something that I look forward to doing this again. I look forward to doing it in person. I definitely think we've done exactly what Susie said, you know, that we've scratched the surface. I have said it publicly. I consider myself to be a down the middle type person, and it is imperative for people to call it out when it happens. When you sit on it, you make it okay. That is not you being quiet is giving everybody else that the green light. I am happy to fight. I am happy to stand with anybody. I can't fight what's inside somebody's head. And today was the first step of getting what's inside everybody's head out. I don't take offense to what anybody has said, and Lord knows that I hope I haven't offended anybody. And if I have, I mean, I'll give you my email, and you can write me an email, and I'll check it when I can. But I look forward to doing more of these on a bigger scale. And I think Susie hit the nail right on the head. Thank you so much, because you made my job just so much easier, Susie. Thank you for me not having to think. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Johnny. We're going to go to Andrea, and then Daryl, you can end us off.
Well, thank you again, Octavia, for inviting me to be on this wonderful panel. And I agree with Troy that this issue transcends politics. It's not an easy topic to talk about. You're really putting yourself out there. And for me, I just hope that you've seen my heart for reconciliation and unity, even though I may not always have the right words to say. But I love our community. I think we can do better. And I am encouraged because, and some of the panelists I met for the first time this evening, but just feel very connected to them, just in the hour or so we've been talking. And this is an example of what I believe is a catalyst to change, and that is authentic relationships with one another.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Daryl?
I thank you for everybody. I'm glad to be a part of this. I feel when we unite, there's unity and community, we can get a lot of things done. I feel the threshold of anything, if we take on the embodiment of Christ and God, we can get a lot accomplished. When we bring him to the forefront, that's when things get solved. Satan has his agenda. His agenda is to kill, steal, and destroy. And he sees that, and he's doing that right now. He's happy. God ain't happy with what's going on in this world. But we have to invite him in order to break down these barriers. And when we see people the way God sees them, we'll be a lot better people. I truly believe that. So it's Christ-centered and Christ-focused. I don't care what kind of job we do. If we have a heart of God, we won't see people for color. We'll see people for who they really are.
Amen. I just want to thank you all, and those of you that will probably watch this later on, Andrea, Johnny, Daryl, Troy, Susie Bowie, Susie Copeland. I just want to thank you all for stepping out and being bold with me. This is not easy. You know, you have friends of all different backgrounds, but it's important that we have to step up and for change, step up for the future of our children and their generations to come. I serve a mighty God. I believe in His Holy Spirit. I believe that when you change someone's heart, you can change their actions. And that means that we can change the way we treat each other and change order our steps, Lord. That's all I can get out is order our steps. And I know if we allow him to order our steps, we'll be okay. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. You all have a great evening. Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Thank you for this forum.